Today on the 50-Pound Brain, we're going to start dealing with the wiring on Higgins. Now there's two things you need to do electrical work. One is a good meter that works in all its functions. And the other thing is a good pizza, because that is brain food. And this can get a little thought-provoking. So let's get started. Now I guess there are more than two things you need. You do also need a good wiring diagram as a reference. I could use this, but I don't have the young eyes like I used to. So we're gonna use this. And as you can tell, Higgins is a pretty simple car as far as wires. From the factory, he only had 2 fuses, which apparently ran everything. And as far as I can tell from this, you basically had front of the car, rear of the car. Each one's run by a fuse. So, and actually, as I'm looking at this, I lie. The only thing fused, it looks like, are the horns on one fuse, and for some reason, wipers, brake lights, turn signals. All the dash lights are hot. Once again, unless I'm reading this wrong. Oh, I see. Yeah, no. All the dash lights are hot. Tail lights, parking lights are hot. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, we can burn this thing down pretty easy, looks like. So, guess if you drive one of these, you're a danger seeker. That's fine. We're gonna make this work. I gotta think. Now the other thing we have to remember is they've got this set up as a positive ground, because that's the way they came from the factory back in '57. Well, now that we've converted to an alternator, we just need to make sure we remember our polarities on the battery and the whole wiring system, because the alternator makes it a negative ground system, which is not a big deal. And how do we remember that? We eat more pizza. Keep our brain fed to remember things like that. So what we're gonna deal with today is something I've only come across on older vehicles like this one. This is from '57, and it's having to deal with screw terminals on electrical components. Let me show you what I'm talking about. These things here, maybe, oh, I guess you can see on the fuse block, same deal, where you've got these screws are what secure stranded wire. And I'll show you the issue with stranded wire and what we have to do to stranded wire to secure them in screw terminals. So what happens when you put stranded wire in a screw terminal type terminal, and it doesn't matter if it's a car or if it's the wiring in your house, what happens is you tighten down the screw and the strands will flatten out. I don't know if you can see that. And then the screw's loose. So what we have to do, you can do one of two things. You can solder this so that it's, for all intents and purposes, solid, or what you can do is put a ferrule. So this is a ferrule. It's just a hollow tube of tin or copper. This one I believe is tin or tin plated. And what you do is you slip this on top of the wire. You have to have a ferrule crimper, and and it crimps it. I don't know if you can see that. So now we've got a solid conductor. Keeps all our strands nice and gathered up. Here's our other one. And you have to buy them by the size of the wire that you're crimping, or that you're, you know, putting them on. And there you have it. Let's see if you can see the end. This is kind of an auto sizing. It'll only crimp down as far as it needs to. I mean, you have to run the handles all the way through, but the jaws are, I don't know what you would call that, semi-pliable or whatever. And so now, let me install these and then I'll show you. Because both of these wires go in here. And the ferrules also come in different lengths as well. These are probably maybe a little long for this application, but it's okay. All right, let me show you our latest dilemma here as far as wiring stuff. So we've got 1, 2, 3 green wires all go into the fuse box, but they go to different places. Brake switch, turn signal flasher, those are easy to find. Here's the turn signal flasher, and notice we have a light green and a dark green. And maybe those matter, maybe they don't. We've got 2 different shades of green in here, I don't know if you can tell, that are both considered green. Now in the case of this turn signal flasher, they do differentiate between light green and green. But we've got a brake switch one over here on the other side of the car. This one, you can probably see it better like that. Maybe not, versus the yellow background. So we've got that one, that's here. We've got those 2 we've already looked at. And then we've got these 2. And possibly this one as well, which is an optional, which goes to a different terminal, but it goes under, ends up under the dash for the heater fan. So on this case, this wire would need to be here instead of all these other greens. If it didn't matter, if they were all mashed under these greens, then it wouldn't be a big deal. But this one needs to be separate from these. So we have to label them. Now I don't have a label maker that does heat shrink, but I do have white heat shrink, and I have a fine tip Sharpie, or extra fine actually. Those big fat ones they call fine tip, and I guess they're fine tip for about a minute. First time you write with them, they dull up and then they make a big fat red black line. So we're going to do a test. That's why I've written test on it. Let's see if you can see it, to see if the Sharpie ink survives being heat shrunk. So let me get set up and we'll get going. Okay, here we go. Sweet, it survived. Excellent. All right, we've got all our wires labeled, all our green wires. So let's shrink them down. Okay, we've got all the ferrules crimped and our labels done. Now this is not, you know, if you were doing a concours restoration, this is verboten. However, as my description to this playlist says, I don't do restorations, I do resurrections. This car is going to be drivable and it's going to be maintainable. So, and I'm lucky that I can do the little block letters, that they shrink down well and are still legible. I have to thank Mr. Brooks in my drafting class that got me in the habit of lettering like that. All right, let's put it together. And here we go. There's all our wiring. This one is actually the fuel gauge. I don't know why they separated fuel gauge and brake lights onto this terminal, because they all use the same fuse, but they did, and maybe it'll become apparent to me later on, but I had to steal this screw for one of these two that was missing. So I've got that expansion. If I need to, I can hook other things in with that, but I crammed them all in here. So, and then this, I'll show you, since we have an alternator now. This is what this looks like inside. Let me show you what it originally looked like. Here's one. My battery tray has become my parts holder, and it's tough to do. So that's what it was, just like that. And I gutted it out. I was going to buy one from Moss Motors. They make they sell a conversion, which I think is just what I did. Somebody takes these and converts them from a generator voltage regulator over to basically a junction box. The 50 amp fuse here goes from the alternator to the battery connections, and I'll show you how this thing is wired on the underside. But yeah, I did this conversion because they were out of them. They were back order at Moss Motors, and they're like $60, and it probably took me a half hour to do this conversion. So it's not hard. You can totally do it. All you need is a soldering iron and a little bit of patience and forethought, and if I come back around to it, I can convert this one and do a video on it. So, but yeah, now this is my other terminal block for all this other wiring, all this mess. All these fat brown and yellow wires go into that. And yeah, I didn't know. I was going to have to like just do splices or something to make all this work, and then I decided to go ahead and do that. You don't have to have this, but it sure does make it handy if, yeah, for nothing else than a terminal block. All right, here's the old voltage regulator turned into junction box, and I'm just giving you a good look at it. You can see this view basically on the Moss Motors website, because this is where I got the idea to do this, especially after I saw that theirs were back order. They may have them in stock now. I didn't even check because I did this to mine, and I have two of these. So if this is messed up or whatever, I can try it again on the second one. And if that one messes up, I'll order one of their junction boxes, but I don't think it'll mess up. But just so you can see what to do, you can totally do this yourself. This wasn't hard. All you have to have is a good soldering iron that can throw some heat to get this junction here nice and hot, because it is some hefty conductive material that's going to sink off your heat. If you have a little, I don't know, like the Harbor Freight 40 watt soldering iron, I don't know if it'll probably melt the solder, but I don't know how good of a joint it would be. And then here's the bottom. These were original wires that went to some kind of bias coil, something, I don't know. You could look in the maintenance manual and see what all it does. I've watched videos on how these things work, and it makes sense as they're talking about it, and then as soon as the video ends, it's like, wait, what? And generators they're okay. They did their job. They don't make the smoothest power, but they do make power, and they do their job. On my 64 Galaxy, I had to convert it to alternator when I put fuel injection on it, because fuel injection computers do not like generator power. Maybe some of the newer ones do. They have better filters in them. The system that I bought was based on old GM throttle body parts, and so it really wanted relatively smooth power coming into it, and a generator doesn't necessarily do that. So when I got an alternator on this one, it was just, I needed a place to put all those wires, and this was the perfect solution for it. So one thing I still have left to do is a connection from here to this circuit, which is these two terminals, which are, you can see, A1 and A. And I can show you my scribbled up drawing from the Moss Motors alternator installation instructions. And this is basically what I've done. So this arc right here is my 50 amp fuse. A and A1 are connected. I just need to connect D to the fuse, which is the center one. No, I'm sorry. This one. Oh, that one is connected. So the other end, D is connected. Oh, the A to A1. These two, or here to there. And then we'll get alternator power through here. I'm gonna make it work, and it's gonna make tons of juice. But I got the 50 amp fuse in there, so that in case the alternator decides to throw 1.21 gigawatts out to the battery and the rest of the car before we go back to the future, that fuse will pop and we'll all be cool. We can still drive on the battery for a minute. I just hope I have some kind of indication that says that I'm running on battery only, and don't overdrive the charge of my battery. That's my concern. So I hope this video on the wiring was educational or informative for you. If you have a TR3, I know that there's not a lot of information on this kind of minutia, especially the harness routing. I've had troubles finding out how the harness is supposed to go in this car. And so I've taken pictures of other people's cars, or had them send me pictures, especially of up under the dash. And I'll show you as I get that more completed in a later video. But I also want to do some changes to the voltage regulator junction block. As I was doing this video, I was looking at it, and I want to make it a little bit more robust than it currently is. So I'll show you those upgrades to it in a later video. So thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe and turn on notifications.